Hey guys, tonight we slip through a cracked window in time and land, nose first, into the crowded, cobblestoned, and wildly aromatic world of 18th century Paris. The air is still, heavy, not with summer heat exactly, but with something older, stickier. A haze that smells suspiciously like boiled onions, overripe pears, and the faintest trace of burning horsehair. You're standing on the edge of history, just outside the city gates, and you've barely taken a breath. And yet your nostrils already regret the decision. You're not exactly walking into history tonight. You're more like trudging slowly through layers of scent, past damp cloaks and steaming carts, under a sky that threatens rain but mostly offers more smell. If history books ever gave you a scratch and sniff version, this would be the page you'd throw away immediately. So before you jump into this boring and sleepy story, please take a moment to like my videos and subscribe to my channel, but only if you actually enjoy and feel comfortable with the stories I tell here. Oh, and tell me your location and what time it is as you listen. I love knowing where these sleepy journeys reach. Now lie down and relax, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's start our boring journey together tonight. You've just passed the crumbling stones of the city gate, and now you're officially inside the boundaries of 18th century Paris, and it welcomes you, sort of, with open arms and open gutters. The first thing you notice is not the architecture. It's not the charming cafes or powdered wigs. It's not even the rattle of iron-shod wheels or the bells of distant churches. No, it's the smell. Think of Paris today, and you might imagine buttery croissants, designer perfumes, or the clean metallic scent of the metro. None of that exists here. In this century, Paris is alive, overcrowded, wet, and above all, unfiltered. The stench begins soft, almost gentle, a kind of old cabbage bass note. Then it deepens into something darker, animal, human, and, let's say, fermented. Horses dominate the streets, leaving their opinions behind in generous heaps. Chickens, goats, and the occasional pig roam semi-freely, and people, oh, the people, layer on their own contributions with every unwashed garment, every sweaty brow, every faint whiff of gin breath escaping a yawn. Historians agree that Paris in the 1700s was one of Europe's densest urban centers. Over 500,000 people crammed into narrow streets and creaky buildings, most of them without access to running water or private toilets. That's a lot of human scent. Some sources say the city was never truly clean, but rarely still. A poetic way of saying it always smelled like something. You turn left down a shaded alley that smells like wet limestone and surprisingly enthusiastic garlic. A woman selling scallions watches you, half curious, half suspicious, her apron smeared with some combination of flour and goose fat. A toddler waddles past in a too large shirt, barefoot, and apparently unconcerned with the sticky texture of the street underfoot. You pass a horse-drawn cart full of root vegetables, some rotting, some barely hanging on. A few are already hosting flies like tiny paying guests. One man walks by with a bundle of what you think might be eels. The smell suggests something far worse. Oddly enough, some people prefer this, or at least they're used to it. Many Parisians reportedly consider these everyday odors as part of the city's soul, like how we associate certain smells with childhood or favorite places. Except instead of apple pie or beach bonfires, it's mildew, pig sweat, and burnt bread crust. There's a fringe theory among scent historians, yes, that's a thing, that people in the 18th century had a more forgiving olfactory system. That is, their noses literally adapted to block out the worst of it, like how you stop noticing your own perfume after 10 minutes. Except it's not perfume, it's decomposing pigeon. Of course, not everyone agrees. Historians still argue whether Parisians truly went nose blind or simply accepted the stink as unavoidable. After all, when everyone smells equally awful, what's the point of complaining? You keep walking. A man pours a bucket of suspicious liquid into the street from a second-story window. It lands with a slap. You step over it and try not to wonder what it was. A mix of dishwater, maybe? Or waste? Or bath runoff? Or all three? The ground squelches beneath your shoe. Congratulations, you're now a full participant in 18th century pedestrian life. A candlemaker passes, his apron stiff with hardened wax. He smells like honey, smoke, and something bitterly chemical. You glance up and notice that the sky, while gray, glows a little gold near the horizon. The sun's trying, really. But even sunlight feels heavy here, like it can't quite cut through the weight of the city's breath. You pass a corner where 4 dogs sleep curled around each other, their fur patched, their tails twitching. The wall behind them is stained with something dark and spreading, possibly wine, possibly blood, possibly something you won't describe in detail because, well, this is bedtime. Someone behind you sneezes, wet, aggressive. You don't turn around. The city pulses with life, but also with the decay of everything that sustains that life. Food, bodies, animals, waste. All of it exists here in thick layers, overlapping and competing for your attention. You're not walking through a museum. You're trudging through a living thing. And that thing has digestive issues. You pause outside a bakery, half hoping the smell of bread might save your nostrils. It almost does. For a second, there's warmth, yeast, flour, butter. Then the door opens, and along with it, the scent of 10 unbathed bodies in a room the size of a closet. You walk on. A bell tolls in the distance. Probably one of the many churches scattered across the city, each one offering salvation, but not much soap. As you reach the edge of this street, the wind shifts. A new smell creeps in, briny with a touch of wet rope. That's the river, and it's waiting for you next. The breeze off the Seine is supposed to be refreshing. At least that's what the city almanacs promise. You take the next corner, half hoping for a crisp river scent to rinse your overworked nostrils. Instead, a wall of quayside air smacks you like an enthusiastic slap from a damp fishmonger. First, there's mud, thick, cold, freshly churned by dock workers' boots. It smells like wet clay mixed with forgotten secrets. Then comes fish guts, sharp, metallic, and unapologetic. Because the riverside markets have spent all morning filleting cod, carp, and unfortunate eels that look like rejected shoelaces. Add a garnish of wilted flower petals, bouquets tossed from passing barges, now composting in slow motion, and voila, Paris's signature river perfume. You step onto wooden planks slick with algae. Below, barges creak, ropes groan, and the water sighs like it's too tired to sparkle. Directly ahead, a woman in a faded blue skirt empties a wicker basket of oyster shells straight into the river. They hit with a chorus of clinks, then vanish into green murk, thick enough to qualify as soup. Mainstream fact, by the mid-1700s, the Seine was Paris's open sewer and supply line in one, a watery paradox carrying drinking water, refuse, fish, laundry suds, and at least a few love letters gone wrong. City records show over 100 official glass discharge points along the quays, plus countless unofficial chamber pot contributions from windows above. The river kept flowing. Parisians kept pretending dilution was the ultimate solution. You lean on a splintered railing described generously as sturdy. It wobbles in protest. On the opposite bank, laundresses beat sheets against angled stones, each slap sending droplets, equal parts water and mystery, into the air. They gossip over the rhythmic thwack-thwack of linen. Someone's cousin ran off with a drummer. Someone else swears by onion poultices for toothache. Their laughter mingles with gull cries that sound suspiciously like heckling. A barge slides past, piled high with barrels that leak a syrupy, molasses-like ooze. The captain, red-nosed and whistling off-key, salutes you with 2 fingers and a grin missing more teeth than it keeps. As the wake rolls in, the river exhales again, brackish, fermented, tinged with rotting cabbage and a daring note of dead rat. You find yourself oddly impressed by its complexity, like a sommelier describing a wine no one should ever drink. Quirky tidbit. Some entrepreneurial Parisians bottled Seine water, advertised it as a universal purifier, and sold it to gullible provincials. Testimonials claimed it cured everything from freckles to melancholy. Historians still argue whether those glowing reports were satire, wishful thinking, or the earliest recorded prank reviews. TripAdvisor, but with more cholera. You inch along the quay, stepping over coils of rope and soggy bundles of who knows what. A boy of maybe 10 scurries past with a basket of herring, leaving a shimmering trail of fish scales that stick to your shoes like glitter's evil cousin. He whistles the same tune Dionysus hummed. Coincidence, or has myth slipped into the mundane again? You decide not to chase that thought. Your brain is busy filing olfactory complaints. A narrow footbridge arches ahead, its planks uneven, its railings decorated with the graffiti of the day. Crude hearts, questionable poetry, and at least one sketch of a horse doing anatomically improbable things. Mid-span, an elderly man sells roasted chestnuts from a small brazier. The smoky sweetness cuts through the fish funk like a polite apology, and you breathe deeper for the first time in minutes. "2 sous," he rasps, offering you a paper cone. You decline with a smile. Your hands are already fragrant enough, but appreciate the brief aroma of charred sugar and nutty warmth. Behind him, a bucket catches drips from the bridge, rainwater, melted chestnut glaze, and whatever fell from the sky when pigeons felt inspired. Below the bridge, 2 men haul up a dripping net. They squint inside, then groan. A stew of riverweed, broken pottery, and a very surprised eel. One man holds it up. The eel coils like a cursed ribbon. He shrugs, tosses it into a barrel, and mutters something about soup for the abbey. You make a mental note, decline all future abbey soups. The moon nudges through clouds, spotlighting floating debris. A lone shoe, a clump of hay, and what might be a wig. Parisian water traffic of the wig kind is apparently common. High fashion takes low dives and windy carriage rides. Somewhere downstream, a beaver dam-like tangle of hairpieces probably fuels rumors of aquatic ghosts with impeccable curls. You follow the quay toward the Pont Neuf, that grand stone bridge King Henry IV proudly built for people watching and, ironically, convenient garbage dropping. An evening crowd gathers there, masked gentlemen, perfume merchants hawking vials of eau de toilette, literally water of the toilet, but you try not to dwell on semantics, and street performers juggling flaming torches that hiss when stray sparks meet river mist. A performer in colorful rags beckons you. He produces a small vial, offers it under your nose. It smells like rose water trying to survive a fistfight with vinegar. You thank him and step back into safer air. Safer being relative. As you lean against the parapet, a breeze shifts, bringing something new. Cut hay? Vanilla? No, soap. Real soap. Faint but unmistakable. You track it to a woman balancing a wooden tub on her hip, lavender sprigs poking from between linens. She's heading toward an upper-class townhouse, and for a moment you glimpse how the other half sniffs. Scented gloves, potpourri jars, and servants tasked with burning bundles of rosemary to outmuscle the ambient funk. Historians still argue whether those perfumed rituals actually masked odors or simply layered floral notes atop the miasma like a lace doily on a mud pie. Either way, You imagine aristocrats congratulating themselves on cleanliness, while the Seine keeps burbling its rebuttal below. The bells strike 8. Night market stalls ignite with oil lamps, their flames jittering in the breeze. Vendors toss handfuls of amber resin onto braziers to entice customers. The smoke spirals skyward, spicy, resinous, almost holy. For 5 glorious seconds, the Seine's breath recedes under frankincense and myrrh. You savor it like a palate cleanser, then sigh as the river reasserts dominance with a waft of raw oyster brine. A carriage clatters by, wheels spraying water from a pothole big enough to qualify as a moat. You sidestep just in time. A passerby isn't so lucky and curses creatively in patois that even your narrator would blush to translate. You chuckle, gently, sleepily, and tuck the memory away as tonight's second joke. The first, if you're counting, was your optimism about the river breeze. Somewhere behind you, a tavern door opens. Laughter erupts along with aroma 73 of the evening. Sour ale, smoked herring, and the unmistakable tang of unwashed leather boots left too close to the hearth. You consider ducking inside, but the lull of water keeps you anchored here, where history's breath feels honest if unpleasant. As you stare into the moving black glass of the Seine, a chill works into your sleeves. The city settles, but it never sleeps. It only changes composers. Daylight's clatter yields to night's softer but no less fragrant symphony. Beside you, a stray cat hops onto the parapet, sniffs the air, wrinkles its nose, and bolts. Even cats draw the line somewhere. You give the river a respectful nod, like 2 rival perfumers acknowledging each other's strongest notes, and turn away. Up ahead, a torchlit arch leads to a quieter street, and perhaps, just perhaps, a momentary pocket of breathable air. You inhale, steel your senses, and step forward. You turn down the torchlit archway, leaving behind the river's aromatic chaos in exchange for something different. You had hoped for respite, maybe even the faintest whiff of clean air. But Paris in the 1700s is like a competitive odorama, each corner of the city vying for your nostrils' attention in its own dubious way. This street is narrower than the quay, flanked by tall buildings that lean slightly inward, as if whispering secrets across the gap. Their eaves almost touch, forming a sort of tunnel that traps every rising scent, every overheated exhale, every fart from a passing goat. The goat, for the record, seems entirely unashamed. It trots past you like a dignitary, bell chiming, leaving a tiny trail of pellets that steam gently in the cool air. A woman in wooden clogs swoops down behind it with a broom. "Murd!" she hisses, either at the goat or at the universe. You nod in sympathy. And here it is, the domestic Parisian alleyway. Mainstream fact. In 18th century Paris, very few homes had indoor toilets. Most had simple chamber pots, or bourdelus, discreet little porcelain vessels for ladies to carry under their skirts. Once full and fullness came quickly, they were dumped out the nearest window, often with a warning cry of "Gare l'eau, watch out for the water," before gravity took its course. That's the theory anyway. But don't flatter yourself, no one actually waited for the street to clear. The cobbles beneath your feet are slick, uneven, and glisten ominously under the flickering light. You do not want to know what's between the stones. You try not to think of how many centuries it's been since these streets were properly washed, if ever. Paris was a city of miracles and saints, but apparently none of them specialized in sanitation. You pass beneath a wooden sign shaped like a pig's head. It marks a butcher's shop that's technically closed, though its lingering scent insists otherwise. Flies dance in lazy spirals near a meat hook that still dangles from the ceiling beam. A splash of something dark stains the doorstep. You assume it's blood. You hope it's blood. The butcher himself leans against a doorway across the alley, gnawing on what might be a sausage or might be a stick. Hard to say. He squints at you and nods with the solemn air of someone who's seen too much viscera to care about yours. You nod back. Respect. Quirky tidbit. Some of the earliest street cleaners in Paris were pigs. Literally. Urban pigs roamed the streets eating scraps, refuse, and occasionally shoes, functioning as a kind of medieval Roomba. The city tried to ban them multiple times, but the public insisted they were essential infrastructure. Historians still argue whether these pigs helped maintain cleanliness or simply redistributed filth with more enthusiasm. A sudden gust funnels through the alley, and with it comes a wave of household smells. Boiled cabbage dominates, a universal odor of Europe before refrigeration. Then there's tallow, rendered animal fat used in soap, candles, and sometimes cooking, though not always in that order. It's thick, greasy, and clings to your throat like bad gossip. Next comes wine, bad wine. The cheap kind stored in barrels that haven't been cleaned since Louis XIV had real hair. Someone's pouring it into clay jugs just ahead of you, and from the slosh and giggle routine going on, they've already had a generous tasting. 2 men and a woman are seated on overturned crates, surrounded by wine stains and broken bread. They raise their mugs to you. One yells, "Vive le roi!" The others boo. Apparently, it's a mixed political crowd. You smile politely and move on before the debate turns to revolution and someone gets poetic. A cat darts past your legs. You're starting to think the cats of Paris know things. It disappears into a doorway from which emerges a smell you can't quite place. Warm. Yeasty. Burnt? Ah. Bread. But not the fluffy baguette-shaped fantasy you might imagine. This is coarse, black bread made from barley, rye, and despair. The baker's assistant stands out front, coughing soot from his lungs and scraping burnt crusts into a basket for the poor. You consider accepting one, but the basket looks like it might double as a coal bin. Still, the warmth is welcome. You lean against the doorway for a moment, absorbing the oven heat as it bleeds through the stone. A baby cries somewhere upstairs. A dog barks in response. Another dog barks in response to that. You've stumbled into a tiny domestic opera, and the theme is hunger, boredom, and barking. Historians still argue whether Paris's infamous smell was worse in summer when heat accelerated the rot, or winter when snow trapped the smells like a wool blanket made of garbage. Either way, they all agree it was unmissable. You edge forward, reaching the point where alley meets square. The street opens up just enough for the air to stir again. It's better, relatively speaking. The new smell is horse. Lots of horse. Sweat, dung, wet leather, and a hint of oats. Carriages clatter past, their drivers shouting at pedestrians who stubbornly believe they always have the right of way. The square centers around a stone fountain. A boy fills buckets from it, even though the water looks suspiciously gray. He sloshes a bit onto his hands, sniffs, and shrugs. His goat drinks beside him. You guess they share everything. You pause by a statue, something Roman, probably. Most of the nose is gone, and a pigeon has taken up permanent residence on the head. The stone has streaked green from years of rain, or maybe just airborne soup. You sit briefly on the edge of the fountain. The stone is cold, damp, and slightly sticky. Around you, the city hums. Lullabies drift from windows. A lute player plucks away near a bakery, singing something vaguely dirty in Occitan. You don't understand it, but the rhythm suggests someone's reputation is being ruined for sport. And beneath it all, the smell. Always the smell. You've almost adjusted. It's become a second skin. It follows you, settles in your hair, clings to your sleeves. Somewhere back home in the 21st century, your hoodie will never be the same. A small wind picks up again, brief, blessed, and almost empty. You sigh. It's not good, but it's better. You take another step and your shoe lands in something soft. You don't look down. You don't need to. You're starting to understand Paris now. Not through paintings or textbooks or powdered wigs, but through its nostrils. The city isn't just seen or walked, it's survived, and you, against all odds, are surviving it. You leave the fountain square behind with its dubious water and sarcastic pigeons threading your way through the narrowing streets that stretch toward the heart of the left bank. The deeper you go, the more you begin to understand a peculiar truth. Paris in the 18th century didn't really have neighborhoods the way modern cities do. It had zones of odor, and unfortunately you're entering one now. The Tanner's Quarter. At first, you think your nose is broken. The scent hits you not as smell, but as sensation, a slap, an insult, a warning. It's sour, animal, and ancient, like a wet dog that died and came back to life angry. Mainstream fact, leather tanning in the 1700s was a nasty business. It involved soaking animal hides in water, lime, and then human urine to loosen the hair, followed by a good scrape and a long soak in fermented animal brains or dog droppings. Yes, brains. Yes, droppings. And yes, the workers did it all by hand. You breathe shallowly through your mouth, which is a mistake. The air tastes like old pennies, wet wool, and regret. A boy runs past carrying a full bucket. Dark liquid sloshes dangerously over the side, splattering onto the cobblestones. You consider asking what's inside, but decide that ignorance is safer. The walls here are stained a permanent ochre from years of tannic acid and drizzled effluent. Every doorway looks like it's seen things no doorway should. A narrow canal snakes between the workshops, lined with piles of drying hides. They hang like ghostly laundry, pale and veined, fluttering in the breeze like skin flags. Workers, mostly men, mostly shirtless, scrape at the hides with blunt knives, grunting in rhythm like some medieval industrial choir. One of them glances up and gives you a toothless grin. You nod, pretending you belong here. The man returns to his hide with a slurp and a squelch. Quirky tidbit, to tan leather using dog dung, tanners often paid children a small fee to collect it from the streets. Some enterprising kids made entire pocket money empires this way. One infamous Parisian street urchin, known only as Croton Luke, was rumored to have mapped every canine in the quarter for optimal harvesting routes. You skirt a pile of soaked hides and stumble over a wooden plank laid across the gutter. Beneath it, the canal churns with a slow, oily menace. You swear something bubbles. It might be gas. It might be frogs. It might be some apprentice who didn't listen. Historians still argue whether tanneries were intentionally placed in the poorest neighborhoods because of the smell, or if the smell made those neighborhoods poor. Either way, no one living near a tannery bragged about their address. Inside one workshop, you glimpse shelves stacked with drying leather, boots, belts, harnesses. A rat sniffs at a half-finished saddle. The tanner shoos it with a hiss. The rat does not seem bothered. Up above, laundry flaps between windows, actual laundry this time. But even the linens seem afraid to get clean. The scent here is so pervasive that it climbs up the walls, saturates the wood, becomes part of the air itself. You wonder if tanners ever noticed it, or if, like the city's other citizens, they'd long since made peace with the nasal invasion. The alley ends in a courtyard, surprisingly quiet. A woman squats on a stool, scrubbing a pair of stained boots with something that looks like brine. She hums a lullaby, sweet and soft. The contrast is surreal. In her lap, a baby dozes, wrapped in what might once have been a fine wool shawl. You wonder if the child will remember this scent, or if, like you, he'll someday spend his adult life trying to forget it. You rest briefly under an awning. Rain begins to patter gently on the rooftops above. releasing an even deeper layer of smell from the tanneries. It's like the buildings themselves are exhaling their ghosts. You pull your coat tighter, though you know it won't help. A tanner calls out to another from across the way, shouting about a missing shipment of gallnuts. You don't know what those are, but from the context, you assume they're either a medieval spice or a form of punishment. More men file past, carrying heavy frames draped with hides, their boots splashing through the dark muck. One laughs, hawks something wet from his throat, and then slaps his companion on the back. They've built a strange fraternity here, one defined by grime, stench, and the kind of jokes only people who touch dung for a living can truly appreciate. You walk again, slower this time. Not just from the smell, but from the weight of what you're witnessing. You came here expecting art, revolution, powdered wigs, and philosophy, but instead you've found hands. Labor. Animal parts, scraped and soaked and turned into goods. There is a dignity here, buried beneath the reek, but you're too tired to find it. A bird lands nearby, probably a crow. It hops, pecks at something unmentionable, and regards you with a knowing stare. Parisian wildlife seems unusually judgmental. You cross into a slightly wider street. A cart rumbles past, its wheels grinding over cobblestones slick with the runoff of industry. On board are bundles of finished leather, neatly tied and ready for the more respectable corners of the city. These hides will become gloves, boots, bookbindings. People will touch them, wear them, read from them, and never know what they smelled like before. The rain picks up. It doesn't clean the street. It simply redistributes the filth more evenly. A small stream begins to flow along the curb, swirling past your feet like a cocktail of historical fluids. You step over it carefully. As you leave the tanner's quarter behind, the air lightens fractionally. You can still smell it on your clothes, in your hair, deep inside your nose. But you're walking forward now, toward bakeries, perhaps, toward lamp-lit bridges, toward a city that stinks but never sleeps, toward the next layer of the dream. You press onward, rounding a crooked corner where the gutter bends and the cobblestones take on a gentler slope. The smell of tannery waste still clings to your clothes like a jealous ghost, but as you drift farther from the reeking quarter, a new scent creeps in, sweet, smoky, and faintly warm. It rises like steam from a hidden hearth, curling into the cold air, wrapping itself around your senses. You follow it without thinking. You're headed toward the bakers. Paris in the 18th century, as you're learning, isn't a single smell. It's a patchwork. A quilt sewn from fumes, sweat, flour, fire, and fermented things. And no place in the city is more beloved or more political than the boulangerie. Mainstream fact, bread was the lifeblood of 18th century Paris. It made up nearly 80% of the average person's diet, especially among the poor. The price of bread was tightly regulated by law, and when it spiked, or when flour ran out, riots broke out. In fact, you're only a few decades from the French Revolution, and the looming specter of a bread shortage was one of its earliest accelerants. But you're not at a revolution yet. Right now, you're in front of a tiny storefront, its shutters flung open to let the heat escape. The sign above the door is painted with a golden croissant, although croissants, truthfully, wouldn't be a regular part of French life until decades later. Someone just liked the shape. A girl, barefoot about 10, waits outside with a ragged sack under one arm. She notices you and grins. Her teeth are mostly there. Inside, a man with forearms like hams tosses logs into a yawning brick oven. The scent intensifies, flour crackling, crust darkening, yeast lifting into air like prayer. You step closer and let it fill your nose. Quirky tidbit. Some Parisians believe that bakers could be judged not just by the taste of their bread, but by the rhythm of their kneading. An offbeat thump was a bad omen. If the dough didn't sound right, the baker might be drunk, or worse, using adulterated flour, which was surprisingly common. Through the haze of heat and flour, you spot a row of fresh loaves cooling on a wooden rack. They're round, misshapen things, each with a blistered surface and scorched bottom from the brick hearth. These aren't dainty pastries. These are survival bread. Ugly, but proud. You step aside as another customer arrives, an elderly man with a cane and a glare sharp enough to butter toast. He mutters something about yesterday's crust, then hands over a worn copper coin. The girl at the counter squints at it, bites it for good measure, and nods. You're tempted to buy one yourself, if only to have something warm to carry. But you don't. Not yet. You're full of tannery air and traveler's caution. Instead, you keep moving. The smell follows, softening with distance, but never quite vanishing. It drifts between stone walls, loops through open windows, rests briefly on every shoulder. Some streets here have a particular magic. This one, for instance. It's known locally as Rue du Levain, though no one can agree whether the name refers to actual yeast or to the baker who once lived here and claimed to have invented a better starter. Historians still argue whether early Parisian bakers were truly artisans in the modern sense, or more like state-controlled laborers, tied to fixed prices, mandatory waits, and daily inspections. There's evidence both ways. But regardless, the baker was one of the few people in a neighborhood everyone depended on. Even the pickpockets showed him respect, most of the time. The sky overhead is still slate-colored, heavy with the promise of rain. Lanterns hang unlit on doorposts, and every now and then a shutter flaps loose in the wind. You imagine people indoors slicing into those still warm loaves, steam rising as they tear the crumb open. There are no butter curls here, no soft spreads, just bread and fingers, teeth and silence. You pass a man wheeling a flour cart, the wheels creak, and the canvas cover flaps, revealing a puff of white dust with every jolt. He's heading toward one of the larger communal ovens near the convent wall, where families too poor to own hearths bake their dough for a few centimes. You follow from a distance, curious. The communal oven is bigger than you expected, a red brick beast with blackened teeth. Smoke puffs lazily from its chimney. A small crowd huddles nearby, some with dough wrapped in cloth, others with scorched loaves they're examining for signs of underbaking. One woman clucks her tongue at a blackened heel and mutters about her mother's recipe. Another insists it's the fault of the nun who stokes the fire. The nun, seated on a bench nearby, does not respond. She sips from a tin cup and watches everyone like a benevolent owl. You drift close enough to feel the heat on your face. There's something comforting here, something ancient. Fire, flour, patience. The dough rises when it's ready, not when you demand it. Paris may smell like chaos, but here, in this glowing corner, it smells like order, like rhythm, like centuries of women whispering secrets over bowls of batter. You take a mental note to remember this smell, to hold it tight when the next alley reeks of something unnameable. The nun sets down her cup and offers you a loaf. Just like that. You hesitate, then take it. The crust is so hard you could break a window with it, but the warmth seeps through your fingers, and when you lift it to your nose, it smells like home. Or at least, like the idea of home. A memory you haven't lived but understand anyway. You break off a piece. It's dense, chewy, slightly sour. Real food. A shout breaks the quiet, a boy crying out that someone has stolen his dough parcel. There's a scramble, then laughter. The nun raises an eyebrow but doesn't move. You chew slowly and turn away. Farther down the street, the air grows cooler again. The bread's scent lingers on your hands, on your breath. It's not enough to make you full, but it helps. It tethers you, reminds you that beneath the rot and dung and oil-slicked gutters, this city still knows how to feed itself. And so, with warm crust in your pocket and flour on your lips, you step forward. Your footsteps echo now, softer than before, muffled by the crumbs in your pocket and the fog curling around your ankles like a lazy cat. You've wandered into one of the quieter quarters of the city, where the alleys narrow and the buildings lean in close, like old friends sharing secrets. The air here smells different. Less of industry, more of stillness. Then suddenly, the scent hits you. Not a stench, not quite, but something sour, ripe, unmistakably alive. You're near the Seine, more specifically, near the washerwomen. The stone steps slope downward toward the river, slick with moss and well-worn by centuries of laundry-hauling feet. You grip the railing, which is really just a rusted chain, and descend toward the sound of water slapping stone, and laughter, and swearing, and the wet slap of linen beaten against wood. Mainstream fact, in 18th century Paris, washerwomen called blanchisseuses were a loud, vital presence. They worked along the banks of the Seine or at communal washing stations, scrubbing clothes with lye, ashes, and soap made from animal fat. It was brutally hard work, and the women who did it were both respected and feared. Their gossip could ruin you. Their strength could humble you. You reach the platform and see them. Half a dozen women, skirts hitched up to their thighs, arms red and slick with river water, is scrubbing stained chemises and breeches with a fury that seems deeply personal. One woman hums as she works, another argues about the price of saffron. A third pauses to glare at a pigeon that's eyeing her laundry line. The scent here is layered. There's the dank river smell, of course, mud and algae and the breath of old fish, but also the nose prickle of lye, the fatty musk of soap, the sharp tinge of unwashed linens, and somehow underneath it all, a sweetness. Maybe someone dropped perfume in the rinse bucket. Maybe someone hoped to trick their lover's nose. You crouch near the edge, close enough to dip your fingers into the Seine. The water is frigid, moving fast, dotted with stray feathers and bobbing refuse. A brown sock floats past, then disappears. You wonder how many secrets this river has swallowed. One washerwoman catches your eye and gestures at your shirt. With a smirk, she makes a scrubbing motion. You look down. Yeah, okay. It's filthy. You mime an apology. She shrugs, then goes back to wringing out a frock like it owes her money. Quirky tidbit. Some washerwomen swore by moonlight for bleaching whites. They'd lay linens across grass under a full moon, insisting it drew out stains better than any soap. Whether it worked or not, it made for a lovely midnight scene. White sheets fluttering like ghosts, watched over by tired hands and sleepy stars. Behind you, two girls giggle over a pair of men's trousers that look far too small. One of them mimics a swagger, hips swinging, and the other nearly chokes with laughter. The river slaps against the platform like it's applauding the performance. Historians still argue whether these communal spaces were more empowering or exploitative. On one hand, the washerwomen carved out their own space, their own economy, even a kind of rough justice. On the other hand, their work kept them soaked, bent and exhausted for most of their lives. But either way, they shaped the city, one wet tunic at a time. You watch as one woman lifts a full basket to her head and strides uphill with the kind of balanced circus performers envy. Her calves are marble. Her stare is daring you to say something. You do not. Instead, you turn from the river and follow the scent trail back up into the city. It clings to you now, the mix of soap and sweat and sun-dried cotton. You imagine people smelling you later and nodding. Ah, you've been to the washerwomen. It's a badge of some kind, a baptism maybe. You pass a man wringing out his own scarf near a spigot and a woman hanging handkerchiefs between two window bars. Laundry isn't confined to the riverside. It spills across courtyards, flaps from balconies, loops over alleyways. The whole city is a clothesline in motion, and each fabric tells its own story. A nobleman's cloak, still stained from last week's feast. A midwife's apron, smudged with herbs and newer things. A child's smock with a tear at the hem and something sticky on the collar. You could read Paris through its laundry. Further along the alley, you pass an old woman sniffing a pile of folded garments. She grimaces, then sniffs again. Finally, she nods and tucks them into a basket. You don't ask what she was checking for. Maybe ghosts. A gust of wind sends a line of socks spinning like prayer flags. You smile, instinctively ducking, though they're well above your head. The scent in the air now is cleaner, fresher. Less like the Seine, more like soap and sunshine and damp cotton. You pass a window where a woman is ironing with a heavy brass tool heated directly over coals. She mutters to herself with each press, as if scolding the shirt for wrinkling in the first place. The air smells of singed linen and effort. You stop beside a small square with a public fountain, its spout shaped like a lion's head. A boy washes his face in the cold water, while his mother scolds him for wasting it. You notice a pair of shoes left to dry nearby, mud-caked soles turned skyward like turtles on their backs. There's something rhythmic about this place. A beat. Wash, wring, hang, fold. It's the background hum of Parisian life, the rinse cycle of civilization. And just as you're about to move on, you hear someone humming again. A lullaby this time. The sound of a city washing itself to sleep. You turn the corner and the smell shifts once more. Onward. You leave the washerwomen behind, their songs fading into the mist like old stories half remembered, and your steps take you towards something much heavier. Not in mood, exactly, but in weight, in scent, in consequence. It's the tanneries now, and oh, you know before you even arrive. Your nose twitches, your eyes water slightly. There's a change in the air, a hot, raw, metallic sharpness mixed with rotting sweetness, and something that can only be described as regret. You haven't even turned the corner yet, and your body's already wondering if this was a mistake. And then you see it. A sunken courtyard, walled off with stacked crates and warped wooden slats, like a sad attempt at privacy. Inside, men and boys move in slow, deliberate rhythms, stirring, scraping, sloshing. The sound is quiet but horrible, like someone stirring soup too thick to eat. Mainstream fact, tanning leather in the 18th century was a gruesome, pungent, necessary business. The process involved soaking animal hides in vats filled with everything from lime and water to dog dung and urine. Yes, urine. It softened the hides and helped remove hair and flesh. Tanneries were always downwind, always unwelcome, and always unavoidable. Paris needed leather for shoes, belts, saddles, bookbindings, and someone had to make it. You walk a little closer, breathing through your mouth. That doesn't help. Now the smell just coats your tongue like oily broth. The air is thick with rot and ammonia and something almost sweet underneath, like dead flowers in summer. A boy glances up from a vat and waves. His hands are stained yellow, his apron brown and stiff with old splashes. He's not unhappy. This is normal to him. You wave back. Carefully, the hides lie in piles, glistening and heavy like the bodies of sea monsters pulled from myth. Some still have hair on them. Others are pink and raw. One is draped across a wooden beam like laundry, but it does not flutter. It clings, wetly. Quirky tidbit. To collect the necessary urine for tanning, full chamber pots were often sold or donated by public houses. In some cities, there were even designated pee collection days. Imagine the pride of knowing your evening ale had contributed to someone's next pair of boots. A tanner nearby is scraping a hide with a curved blade. He moves with the confidence of repetition, thousands of strokes over thousands of hides. His arms are corded with muscle. His face is streaked with salt and stubble and something that might be sadness, but might just be sweat. You wonder what it's like, working in a world where everything smells like death and profit. He dunks the hide into a dark vat, stirs it with a long pole, then lifts it out and smacks it onto a wooden frame. You can hear the slap echo against the stone walls. It sounds final. Historians still argue whether tanning was considered a necessary evil or a respectable trade. Some tanners were feared, others merely tolerated. There are records of neighbors protesting new tanneries being built, claiming the air would turn black and stinking for a quarter-mile around. They weren't wrong. You move past the courtyard trying not to step in anything squishy. A cat eyes you from a fence post, its tail twitching like it knows secrets. Its fur is matted. You don't blame it. You climb a small hill and reach a place where the wind finally shifts, and the smell eases up a little. Not much, but enough to breathe again. You didn't realize how tightly you were holding yourself until now. At the top of the hill is a leather shop. The contrast is surreal. Inside, everything smells rich and warm. Treated hides, beeswax, oil, cedarwood polish. Belts hang in rows like disciplined soldiers. Gloves rest in careful pairs. There's a saddle on the counter, embossed and gleaming. The same material that reeked like death down the road now shines like status. The transformation is complete. No trace of the stench remains here, just the illusion of cleanliness. A clerk with soft hands nods at you. You nod back. Neither of you mentions what you both know. It's strange, isn't it? How one city can contain both the horror and the gloss, just a few streets apart. You linger a moment, letting your senses recalibrate. The leather scent here is thick but not offensive. It's luxury, not labor. There's a thin line between the two. Back outside, you walk on, and the tanneries vanish behind you. Their presence lingers on your clothes, in your hair, at the back of your throat. But the city moves on, as always. Paris doesn't pause for its smells. It just layers them. You turn down another alley where sunlight filters through clotheslines, and a small boy chases a chicken. A woman with a bandaged foot tosses breadcrumbs to pigeons. The normalcy is almost jarring. The tannery might as well be a dream, a dark, wet, smelly dream. Still, you know it's there. Still, it matters. Still, it's part of what this city is made of. The scent of cured leather and warm beeswax fades behind you as you keep walking. Paris, like a strange old creature, constantly shifts its face, ugly one moment, elegant the next. And now you're descending into another face entirely, a darker one, a damp one. The Seine draws you in again, not the glittering open part, but something far more tucked away. A canal, narrow and shadowy, runs parallel to a row of squat stone buildings with warped shutters and moss-eaten stairs. Here, the air changes again. It's aquatic, but not in a refreshing way. This isn't sea breeze or river spray. This is old water, trapped water, mildew, rusted chains, sodden wood, and something worse beneath it all. Mainstream fact, in the 18th century, before modern sewers were fully realized, many of Paris's waste and runoff systems funneled into natural waterways, especially the Seine's offshoots. This led to stagnant, mosquito-ridden canals that practically stewed in heat and excrement. City planners tried, truly, but until Baron Haussmann's renovations decades later, Paris was largely marinating. You crouch by the canal edge, trying not to gag as you peer into the dark water. A thin, greasy sheen swirls across the surface. A frog croaks. You're not sure whether it's alive or just trapped in some evolutionary purgatory. Near your boot, something glints. A broken shard of mirror or glass? You're not brave enough to find out. A man pulls a skiff through the water ahead of you. The oar makes a sound like slapping meat. He whistles faintly, tunelessly. You think you recognize the tune. Then you realize it's not a tune. It's just air and boredom. He's alone in the boat, but not in the canal. Shapes move near the waterline. A dog with 3 legs watches you warily from a stack of emptied barrels. You wave, it blinks. You both look away at the same time. Quirky tidbit. Some Parisians living near the canal swore the water could change your dreams. There were whispered stories of visions, fevered prophecies, or nightmares about fish with human mouths. Whether from mold, methane, or suggestion, who knows? But enough people mentioned it that some superstitions advised never sleeping too close to slow water. You pass a drainage archway, an open mouth carved into the wall of the embankment. It breathes out a warm, damp gust that smells like compost and forgotten sins. A rat scurries from the edge, tail whip thin and horrifyingly long. You step back instinctively, almost slipping on something slick. Historians still argue whether these canal zones functioned more like infrastructure or urban wilderness. They were used, certainly, by scavengers, smugglers, poor fishermen, but rarely regulated. Some maps simply labeled them with vague words like low zone or difficult area, as if the cartographer wanted to skip it and move on. A child appears beside you. Where did she come from? She's barefoot, her feet crusted with grime, her hair in a stiff braid. She points into the water, murmurs something about the silver eels, then runs off laughing. You never see the eels. You step carefully now. The stones along the water's edge are slippery as if they sweat. Something clunks under your foot, and you jump, convinced it's a body or a relic. It's a boot. Just a boot. Very old. Probably full of very bad things. Farther along, there's a stretch of overgrown vines, nature pretending to be generous. But the vines hide graffiti. Not modern spray paint, of course, but carved symbols and crude drawings. Lovers' initials, a fish with legs, a perfect circle etched again and again. You touch it. The stone is cool. A washer stands beneath the bridge arch, beating clothes against a flat rock. You almost want to shout, "Don't use that water." But she looks right at you and says flatly, "It's clean enough for this." You nod, unsure if she means the clothes or the life she's lived. You hear voices echoing through a tunnel, male and sharp-edged. A group of dock workers, maybe, or men doing something they shouldn't. Either way, you don't linger. The canal takes on a strange claustrophobia, like even the air has secrets now. Then, around the bend, a miracle. A bakery. Wedged between 2 damp brick walls, its wooden shutters wide open, a glow of golden warmth pours out. Bread. Glorious, crusty, yeasty bread. The scent overwhelms everything else. For a moment, the world smells edible again. You stand still. You breathe it in. The baker inside sings as he pulls loaves from a deep brick oven. His hands are like tree roots, thick, burnished, precise. A child runs in, hands outstretched, and leaves with a roll the size of her face. You buy nothing. You just take the moment. Let the scent of bread replace the water rot. Let something soft and human settle back into your bones. Then quietly, you walk on. Back down the canal. Past the sewer mouths and the boatmen and the cymbals. Past the slinking rats and the silver eels you never saw. And eventually you reach dry, wide streets again. You didn't realize how damp your skin felt until it stops. Paris shrugs again, changing costumes mid-step. And now it's time for another smell entirely. The scent hits you before the scenery does. Sour cabbage, slow-simmered onions, and something sharp. Vinegar, or maybe spoiled wine. You're entering one of the city's tightly packed residential quarters where windows breathe out steam, gossip, and food fumes all at once. It's early evening now, or what passes for it in 18th century Paris. Shadows stretch longer, fires flicker behind crooked shutters, and someone's making soup. The street narrows again, this time not because of construction, but because of people. Dozens of lives tucked into buildings with warped beams and steep staircases, where every step up feels like a creak from history itself. Laundry drips from ropes above your head, the water carrying faint traces of lye and lavender, or sometimes just old sweat. A cat leaps from one window to another, absolutely silent, completely uninterested in your astonishment. You pass by a doorway with a red curtain and the distinct smell of cloves and honey. A woman inside sings softly, her voice slow and low like molasses. You pause, listening. Her melody sounds older than the buildings, something lullaby-shaped and full of aching vowels. A child listens, curled up at her feet, chewing a piece of dry bread like its treasure. Mainstream fact, communal living was the norm in 18th century Paris for the working classes. Families, apprentices, widows, and strangers often shared the same floor, sometimes even the same bed, particularly in the colder months. Privacy was not a concept so much as a luxury, and many residents grew accustomed to the constant company and aroma of others. You squeeze through a lane barely wider than your shoulders, brushing against hanging pots, stray stools, and one particularly bold goose. The scent here changes minute by minute. Fresh yeast rolls baked in a clay oven, then the charred bitterness of something spilled and scorched. A hint of tobacco drifts from a cracked upper window, sweetened with orange peel and dampened by mildew in the floorboards. A man scrubs a bucket just outside his door. You want to think it's soap and water, but the look in his eyes suggests otherwise. You give him space. His bucket sloshes with a dark slurp. You don't ask. You just keep walking. Quirky tidbit. Some Parisian apartment dwellers kept jars of vinegar or bowls of dried herbs at their windowsills to purify the air. Not for health, necessarily, though that was the pretext, but to counteract the unbearable proximity of other people's smells. Sage, mint, and orange peels were especially popular. Occasionally, someone with flair might even toss a handful of cinnamon into the hearth just to pretend it was festive. The street bends, and you find yourself between two bakeries, one full of crusty, rich loaves, and another pushing a sticky, candied pastry you've never seen before. The smell of sugar is intoxicating, especially after the vinegar parade. Children crowd the door. One licks syrup from his own elbow. Another offers you a bite. You say thank you, but you're already full of experience, if nothing else. A burst of laughter draws you into a courtyard. It's not visible from the street, so just a quiet open space tucked between buildings. Inside, a man stirring a cauldron over a fire, a woman wringing out a sheet, two girls arguing over a doll made of tied rags, and smells. Oh, so many smells. Boiled herbs, chicken bones, the sharp tinge of sour wine dumped from a window earlier that morning. Historians still argue whether the domestic scentscape of working-class Paris was primarily a result of poverty or simply the natural state of urban proximity. What's clear is that everyone was keenly aware of everyone else's presence through the nose. Even love affairs, it's said, began with a shared scent. Fresh bread, sweat, after labor, or a touch of lavender water behind the ear. You wander farther into the beating heart of this neighborhood. Someone's roasting chestnuts and the smoky, sweet aroma wraps around you like a scarf. It's comforting. Temporary. Another scent already creeps beneath it. Latrine. A chamber pot emptied from a window above, just moments ago. You dodge the splash, but your shoes aren't so lucky. The crowd barely notices. Business as usual. You pause at the edge of a stoop. The wood is worn smooth from centuries of feet. A group of women peels vegetables nearby, chatting in quick bursts of gossip. You catch phrases, "He sold it for 2 sous." "She's got another baby." "The priest never came back." Their laughter floats upward. Their hands never stop working. A man leans out of a window above, brushing his teeth with a twig soaked in ash. You lock eyes briefly. He grins, spits onto the cobblestone, and nods like you've shared a secret. You nod back, unsure if you should be flattered or worried. The world here is stacked, layered, compressed into intimate geography. Lives built upward when space ran out sideways. You hear a violin through one window and a screaming infant through another. Somewhere, someone is frying onions. Somewhere else, someone has just sneezed onto a loaf of bread. And yet, there's life here. So much life. People finding joy in spite of proximity, cooking with pride, scrubbing floors, not because it changes much, but because it feels like order. It's easy to dismiss the smell of old places as filth, but here it's more like a signature. Every dish cooked, every candle burned, every breath taken, it leaves a trace, and those traces linger. You take one last loop through the corridor. The air has changed again, this time thanks to rain. A brief passing drizzle leaves everything slightly freshened, slightly steamier. The cobblestones hiss softly under your feet. And above you, a woman pours lavender water from a small bottle onto the windowsill. Just a few drops. A small rebellion against the air. You breathe it in. It helps, a little. And then, through a hidden gate, you exit the residential maze and step into a wider, grander street. Another scent is coming. You step out of the cramped warren and straight into a different planet. One paved in polished stone, lit by lamps in gilded cages and perfumed by ambition. The boulevard ahead isn't just wider, it's swaggering. Rows of horse-drawn carriages glide past, wheels hissing on damp cobbles. Each carriage carries its own bouquet. Leather seats rubbed with beeswax, polished wood, and, inevitably, horse exhaust. The contrast hits your nose like a drama critic delivering a scathing review. You pause beneath an iron street lamp. Its oil flame flickers inside a glass bell, throwing quivering halos onto the pavement. Just beyond, rows of lime trees stand like well-dressed guards, their leaves releasing a faint citrus tang under the pressure of evening dew. You inhale, and for a heartbeat it feels almost pleasant. Then a carriage jolts by, splashing you with eau de route. A surprise sampler of mud, manure, and whatever the driver had for dinner. You leap sideways, dignity flapping like a startled pigeon. Mainstream fact: by the mid-18th century, Parisian boulevards, especially those around the Palais Royal and the Grands Boulevards, became promenades for the fashionable. Street lighting with oil lamps was introduced to deter crime and theoretically improve the nighttime air. In practice, it mostly illuminated just how many horses one city could cram onto a single thoroughfare. You join the flow of evening strollers. Silk gowns rustle, powdered wigs bob, a gentleman's perfume drifts by, an assertive blend of bergamot, clove, and "I'm richer than you." Moments later, another wave of scent hits, roasted chestnuts from a copper pan, their shells cracking like tiny fireworks. You can't decide which aroma is stronger, the cologne or the chestnuts, so you mentally award them joint custody of your nostrils. A cafe terrace looms on your right, lanterns twinkling like drunk fireflies. Patrons sit elbow to elbow, sipping tiny cups of coffee so bitter it could file a tax complaint. You catch the tang of freshly ground beans mingling with tobacco smoke and hot wax from candles fighting the breeze. A waiter hustles past, sloshing coffee across pewter saucers, muttering in staccato French that sounds suspiciously like cursing. You imagine asking for decaf, then decide you value your life. Quirky tidbit: coffee in 18th century Paris was often brewed with a hint of chicory, partly to stretch expensive beans and partly for flavor. Some cafes even added a dash of burnt sugar or rum. Call it an early prototype of the caramel macchiato, minus the brand name markup. Across the boulevard rises the elegant facade of a perfume shop. Its open door breathes out clouds of scent. Jasmine, rose, civet. That's fancy talk for smells a bit like cat, but somehow expensive. Inside, glass flacons gleam like captured moons. A woman in violet silk stands at the counter, sampling a fragrance by dabbing it onto her handkerchief, because nothing says romance like blowing your nose into 20 livers worth of imported essence. Horse hooves clop behind you, rhythmic as a metronome. You step aside as a courier gallops past, carrying a satchel sealed with wax. The horse snorts, exhaling steam and a whiff of hay-scented body odor. You can practically taste the stable. You vow never to complain about your modern commute again. Historians still argue whether the distinctive odor of Parisian boulevards leaned more floral or fetid. You muse aloud, half to yourself, half to an elderly poodle staring from a lace-curtained window. The dog blinks, unconvinced. You shrug. Maybe academic debates aren't as thrilling without footnotes. Farther along, you encounter a bookseller's stall lit by two sputtering candles. The wax drips onto parchment pages, adding its own note of warm tallow to the olfactory orchestra. You flip through pamphlets about philosophy, gossip, and one scandalous tract entitled The Perfumed Court. It smells faintly of ink and secrets. You consider buying it, then remember you left your wallet 2 centuries in the future. A street musician appears, violin tucked beneath his chin, bow dancing like a gossiping sparrow. Each note swirls the air, stirring dust, perfume, and the yeasty exhale of nearby bakeries closing for the night. You drop an imaginary coin into his case, and move on, the tune following you like perfume on silk. You pass a public fountain where servants scrub silverware for a banquet you'll never attend. Soap, made from animal fat and wood ash, floats in greasy halos. The water's chill mixes with the metallic tang of pewter trimmed in tarnish. One servant sneezes, another scolds him for adding extra seasoning to the plates. You wonder if germ theory will arrive before the dessert course. Spoiler, no. A pastry cart trundles by, leaving behind steam heavy with butter and sugar. The scent wraps around your head like a bakery tsunami. You almost chase it, only to be derailed by a sudden blast of sulfur from street cleaner torches burning discarded straw. The competing aromas duel like rival divas. You crown the pastry the winner. Sulfur takes second place, mostly out of fear. Joke 1. You contemplate bottling that pastry smell, selling it as eau de croissant, and retiring early. Then remember it would just attract pigeons and existential dread. Joke 2. You consider inventing deodorant for horses, then realize the city would go bankrupt buying it. Joke 3. You imagine writing Yelp reviews in 1760. Great boulevard, 5 stars, would dodge chamber pot again. A night watchman limps past, lantern swinging. He sprinkles salt on slick stones to prevent slips, though mostly he just creates salty mud. The scent of brine tickles your nose. Behind him, a pair of noblemen strut by, wigs powdered to ghostly perfection. They trail a musk of ambergris, essentially whale barf distilled into luxury. You raise an eyebrow. They raise their chins higher. Social equilibrium achieved. The boulevard widens into a plaza flanked by ornate townhouses. Lanterns hang from wrought iron brackets, their light shimmering off fountains that seem cleaner than they were an hour ago. Rain? Wishful thinking? Either way, the scent shifts again, cooler, almost fresh. You breathe in deeply, grateful until a gust of wind whisks manure particles back into the mix. Paris has a sense of humor. You find a stone bench beneath a chestnut tree and sit. The leaves rustle softly, releasing a faint almond scent. Heaven. For 30 seconds. Then a carriage passes, rattling the bench, and a droplet of something questionable splashes at your feet. You look up. A stable boy waves apologetically. You wave back. You've grown philosophical about airborne liquids. As the plaza settles, you notice the faint echo of church bells, far off, muffled. A reminder that curfew is nearing. Candles disappear behind shutters. Perfume shops close their doors. The boulevard exhales, surrendering its bustle to the night. You stand. The residual fragrance tapestry clings to your clothes. Coffee smoke, horse, rose, pastry, salt, and a daring note of mystery goat from earlier. A scent historian's dream or nightmare. Another street ahead beckons. It leads toward the river again, where different smells await. Damp stone, algae, and if you're lucky, a breeze strong enough to scrub your sinuses clean. You follow the lanterns, eager, if that's the right word, to see what Paris's next odor has in store. You wander downhill now, back toward the Seine, though calling it a freshwater river might be the greatest lie of the Enlightenment. The closer you get, the thicker the air becomes, an invisible fog of brine, fish guts, wet wood, and that unmistakable note of human optimism slowly rotting on the breeze. You brace yourself. If Paris had a nasal boss fight, this would be it. The riverside appears, flanked by warehouses and docks with timber beams blackened from both smoke and centuries of disappointment. You pass a fisherman unspooling nets that smell like a seafood graveyard left in a sauna. Each step takes you deeper into a world of wet ropes, dead eels, and barrels crusted with salt and secrets. The planks beneath your feet creak with each footfall, like they're warning you, no refunds on regrets down here, friend. Mainstream fact, the Seine, by the 18th century, had become both the lifeline and latrine of Paris. It was a transportation hub, a water source, a dumping ground for tanneries and households, and even on occasion, a venue for executions. Drinking from it was an act of either bravery or utter despair, possibly both. You lean on a mossy railing and look out across the inky water. A barge drifts by, its cargo covered in canvas and its captain puffing a pipe that smells like burning hay and despair. He nods at you. You nod back. It's the unspoken agreement of river folk. We both smell like this, and we're not apologizing. Behind you, a group of laundresses are scrubbing linens on flat stones, slapping wet fabric with a rhythm that borders on violence. Their soap is homemade, animal fat lion lavender if you're lucky. If you're not, it's whatever they could boil down from last week's bacon grease. You inhale cautiously. It's half cleansing, half culinary, and entirely confusing. A teenage boy is urinating off the side of the quay with all the nonchalance of a seasoned street cat. You look away, but the damage is done. One nostril flares in betrayal. He sees you notice and grins like a future tax evader. Quirky tidbit. It was considered perfectly normal, expected even, for Parisian men and boys to relieve themselves along the Seine's banks. In fact, some municipal officials argued this was better than doing it in alleys where it might fester. Civilized degradation, if you will. A wine merchant opens a warehouse shutter nearby, releasing a gush of grape-scented air, sour and sweet at once, like joy that's gone bad. You wonder how many barrels in there are fit to drink, and how many are fermenting into vinegar with big dreams. A rat runs past, pausing only to judge your shoes, then disappears into a crate of onions. You decide not to take that personally. Historians still argue whether the riverside odorscape was more dominated by fish or fermentation. You muse, massaging your temples as a dead gull floats by like punctuation. You follow the curve of the quay, boots squelching on wet stone. Ahead, two tanners lug a dripping pelt between them. Probably cowhide, possibly not. It smells like wet dog, singed leather, and whatever the word medieval would smell like if it could sweat. A stray dog follows them hopefully, then wisely turns away. You hear the rhythmic splash of oars. A small passenger skiff rows by with a few bundled figures. One of them is sobbing into their hands. You imagine it's from heartbreak, but it could just as easily be the smell of their seatmate's pickled herring lunch. Paris keeps you guessing. Joke 1. You momentarily consider bottling river air and marketing it as eau de Seine. Tagline, for when you want to smell like rebellion and regret. Joke 2. You ponder how many noses have just given up trying down here. 1,000 a year? 10,000? There's probably a patron saint of scorched nostrils. Joke 3. If you had a coin for every time you said, "What is that smell?" today, you'd have enough to bribe someone to carry you in a perfume-drenched litter. You duck into a riverside tavern for a brief olfactory reset. It smells like all taverns in all centuries. Smoke, spilled ale, sweat, and low expectations. A barmaid nods at you, eyes rimmed in soot and mascara that's probably just yesterday's chimney dust. She slams a mug in front of a sailor whose breath could peel paint off a schooner. The wooden walls are soaked with centuries of vaporized life. Laughter, vomit, arguments about card games, confessions yelled too late, and every single bodily fluid you can name, plus a few that no longer have proper names. You stand in the doorway trying to pretend your lungs are waterproof. They are not. You step back out. The sky above is dark now, stars flickering behind chimney smoke. The river seems to shimmer more now, its surface alive with reflections and refuse. You spot a few boys with torches spearfishing for eels, which they do with a cheerfulness that suggests they've never known smellier jobs. You hope they never will. Nearby, a barge moors with a groan. Men heave barrels onto the dock, grunting in rhythm. One cracks open and spills salted fish, pungent, leathery things that slap the planks like slugs in metal armor. The scent makes your eyes water. You blink. The workers don't. Either they've gone noseblind or their souls escaped years ago. You lean against a stone wall crusted with barnacles. It smells like seaweed and old pennies. You sigh. For a moment, a breeze sweeps up from the water, crisp and nearly clean. It smells of distant rain and something else, maybe freedom, or just fresher garbage. It fades quickly. A priest passes with a censer, the swing of incense wafting over you like a rescue rope. Myrrh and frankincense. Divine intervention. You nearly weep. Then realize he's headed to a riverside funeral barge. The moment sours again, but you appreciate the effort. The priest coughs into his sleeve and mutters a prayer for the dead, or possibly the smell. The last scent of the night hits you as you pass a warehouse that stored spices. Through a crack in the wood, a whisper of cinnamon and pepper sneaks out, like gossip escaping a convent. It's warm, familiar, even comforting. You stand there for a while, nose pressed close, pretending you're anywhere else. Eventually you push onward, nose slightly numb, eyes watering, heart heavy with the knowledge that this was normal. This was Paris. The glamour above balanced on the rot below, the powder on the stink, the romance on the grime. And even still, it had a rhythm, a strange, smelly beauty, one you now carry with you, deep in your lungs, embedded in your coat, and possibly tattooed inside your soul. You breathe it all in, because at this point, what else can you do? Your boots carry you eastward now, away from the river's pungent cradle and into a part of the city that smells different, but not better. It's the artisans' quarter, a maze of narrow alleys where industry lives and dies loudly. The scent here is not so much one smell as it is an argument between many. You are not sure who is winning. You duck under a wooden beam bracing two crooked buildings and find yourself surrounded by the workmen of Paris, cobblers, blacksmiths, coopers, glaziers, and a man who may or may not be tanning dog leather. His apron says yes. His eyes say, "Don't ask." Mainstream fact: the 18th century Parisian economy leaned heavily on guilds and trades, each with its own section of the city and a signature smell, be it the burnt metal of the forge or the vinegary sting of dye vats used by cloth makers. These neighborhoods formed what historians sometimes call the olfactory zones of pre-industrial Paris. To your left, a cobbler pounds a nail into a sole. The tang of glue, leather, and old sweat rises like a toast. You try not to inhale too deeply. It smells like commitment and foot fungus. He hums a tune, unfazed. Further down, a metalworker pumps a bellows, coaxing a small furnace to life. The blast of heat sears your cheeks and brings with it the cleanish scent of iron, coal, and whatever his tunic caught on fire last week. Sparks jump from the anvil like fireflies with opinions. Behind him, a boy is stirring something in a pot. You peek in. It's horse urine and wood shavings, an old recipe for treating hides. You nod slowly, backing away, pretending to admire the brickwork. Quirky tidbit: Parisian apprentices often worked barefoot even in winter to avoid damaging the family's only pair of shoes. As a result, many developed hardened, calloused feet referred to as leather soles. Some claimed these kids could walk across nails and not flinch. You don't test the theory. A woman exits a doorway carrying dyed fabric in shades of red so vibrant they almost distract from the reek of boiled cochineal beetles used to make it. Almost. You smile politely. She glares. Apparently, your face made a smell. She hangs the cloth to dry beside a steaming vat, which radiates heat and the unmistakable aroma of death being useful. You ask no questions. She gives you none. Joke 1. You imagine a 1700s Yelp review. Great fabric, smells like beetle stew. 3 stars. Joke 2. You pass a glazier cutting window panes. He sneezes, and a shard hits the ground with a musical plink. You wonder if he's the original inventor of aggressive sneeze-based decoration. Joke 3. You walk by a man stirring a vat with a stick so long it might qualify as a bridge. The smell says glue, but your soul says don't confirm. You come across a barrel maker, his arms sinewy, his shirt a patchwork of smoke and resin. Each ring of his hammer creates a soft tremor in the ground. His workshop smells like sap and splinters and second chances. You kind of like it. The air turns resinous as you pass a joiner's shop. He's sanding something, and the scent of freshly cut pine floats out like a memory you never had. It's the cleanest thing you've smelled in hours. You pause, nose tilted. He grins and waves his saw. Then come the soap makers, but not the lavender-drenched ones you were daydreaming about earlier. No, these are the real ones. Boiling fat in open cauldrons, ladling thick white paste into molds while shouting over the steam. The aroma is part lard, part ash, and part regret. A goat bleats from inside a crate. You don't ask. Historians still argue whether soap making improved or worsened the local smellscape, you mumble, blinking through the haze. Either way, the goats weren't consulted. The alleys narrow further, the buildings pressing close like old relatives. You nearly trip over a stack of discarded wax stubs from a candlemaker's shop. They smell vaguely of bees and burnt hope. A cat lounges nearby, eyes half shut, smelling like he's seen worse. You find yourself at the doorstep of a perfumier, a rare oasis in this chaos. The door creaks open, and for a moment the air shifts. Rosewater, citrus peel, faint clove. You lean in instinctively, nostrils flaring in gratitude. Then you catch the underlayer. Whale vomit. Ambergris. Expensive and revolting. You step back, offended and impressed. A young girl sweeps the step. Her broom kicks up dust laced with all these clashing aromas. It smells like a history museum exploded, and only the nose survived. You turn onto a narrow back lane where parchment makers soak animal skins in lime water. The tang is bitter and chalky, like a mouthful of soap and secrets. You pass quietly so as not to disturb the enormous dog tied nearby who smells like he's also been soaked in lime water. The smell of ink seeps into the air as you near a printing shop. Burnt paper, stale oil, and something almost metallic. The printer's fingers are stained black. He nods at you, then drops an F-bomb in Latin as a page jams. You keep walking. You round the corner and nearly trip over a stray basket of onions left by a grocer who likely uses the alley as storage. The scent is sharp and eye-watering, familiar but aggressive. A cat bats one experimentally, then looks at you like it was your idea. You pause to catch your breath, though not your scent. That's long gone. You lean against a wall beside a bakery just finishing for the day. Yeast, ash, and roasted flour linger in the air like a warm blanket someone coughed on. Your nose is confused but thankful. You accept the small victory. The light's dimming now, and the working folk begin locking up, hanging bundles of herbs or cloves in the doorway to mask what they can't clean. You walk slowly, each shop fading into the next like chapters in an aromatic novel. Tragic, funny, and deeply unedited. Your feet ache, your eyes sting, and your sense of smell is now a battered drum barely responding. But there's a strange calm to it all. This is the pulse of Paris, not the perfume counters or powdered wigs, but the glue pots, the soap vats, the cracked hands, and the stubborn smells they leave behind. You trudge forward, not because it gets better, but because your curiosity has worse stamina than your legs. And besides, who could sleep now, knowing there's still so much left to smell? You've made it through the alleys of smoke and soap and glue, and now your path winds toward the markets. Specifically, Les Halles, the great belly of Paris. It is twilight now, but the smells do not sleep. If anything, they sharpen. The scent of commerce is never idle. Les Halles is less a place and more a phenomenon. Stalls upon stalls, fishmongers, butchers, bakers, florists, and vendors of things you'd rather not categorize. It's crowded, noisy, and deeply fragrant in ways you will struggle to forget, no matter how many showers your century offers. You step around a pile of wilted herbs crushed underfoot, releasing a dying burst of green, basil, maybe, or something pretending to be. Mixed in is the omnipresent bass note of spoiled cabbage. Cabbage, like hope, was everywhere in 18th century Paris. Mainstream fact, La Halle, known as the stomach of Paris, was the city's central market hub for fresh food, both legal and enterprisingly acquired. Goods came in by wagon before dawn and left in baskets, aprons, or occasionally just someone's coat. Its chaotic ecosystem fed thousands daily. The fish section hits you first, not literally, thankfully, but close. You're greeted by the tang of brine, scales, and what might be existential despair. It's powerful, fishy in a way that bypasses the nose and punches you in the soul. A boy drags a wooden cart of sardines past you, sloshing fish water onto your boots. You pretend not to notice. Everyone here pretends. It's a mutual agreement. He yawns and wipes his hands on an apron that hasn't been cleaned since Louis XIV. Quirky tidbit. Some vendors in La Halle believed placing rosemary sprigs around their fish would trick the nose and help sales. It didn't work, but it did confuse the flies. You pass an eel vendor whose tub rides like a sack of sentient bootlaces. He grins, holding one up like it's a prize. You nod politely, resisting the urge to scream. Joke 1. You wonder if eels ever dream of getting revenge. Maybe a tiny guillotine in a puddle. Turning left, you stumble into the meat lane and it hits you like a falling ox. Blood, fat, sawdust, and the sharp metal scent of cleavers meeting cartilage. It's a massacre you're encouraged to shop from. Butchers bellow prices over the din, waving limbs that look distressingly recent. A headless pig hangs from a hook, its feet still twitching with memory. You look away and inhale the scent of a nearby bread stall instead. It's warm and soft and the exact emotional support you need right now. The baker offers you a crust of something unpronounceable but blessedly baked. You take it. It tastes like flour and forgiveness. A few stalls down, you spot a cheese vendor. The smell gets there first. It is formidable, a mix of mold, milk, and mischief. Blue veins, white rinds, oozing surfaces. This is not cheese for the faint of heart. This is cheese that knows its own power. You brave a sniff, instantly regret it, and back away, straight into a flower cart. Petals and pollen explode in a minor riot of lavender and crushed violets. The florist doesn't blink. She's seen worse. She rearranges a few roses, then douses them with vinegar. You don't ask. Historians still argue whether market smells reflected class distinctions or simply exposed them. You mutter, brushing petals from your hair. Les Halles made everyone equal, equally overwhelmed. Joke 2. You imagine Marie Antoinette wandering in here and fainting directly into a tub of anchovies. Probably wouldn't have helped her reputation. Onward you press into the grain section. It smells of straw and old flour, like a barn that gave up and moved to the city. Sacks of millet, rye, oats, and wheat lean lazily against barrels. A mouse darts out from behind one and gives you a look of shared suffering. Vendors here are quieter. The grain doesn't shout like meat or fish. It whispers, rustles, powders the air in pale clouds that tickle your throat. Near the end of the row, a man is selling dried fruit, though most of it seems to be arguing with mold. You pass quickly, only to nearly collide with a live chicken in a basket. It squawks with the voice of someone who's had enough of this century. You spot a woman selling offal beside a crate labeled Misk. The smell is a challenge you do not accept. She eyes you coolly. You pretend to need flowers. The air shifts again as you move toward the cooked food stalls. Roasting meats, boiled chestnuts, caramelized nuts, and the unmistakable perfume of burnt sugar. It's the closest thing to temptation you've felt all day. You consider it, then remember the eel guy. You stop at a stall selling spiced wine. The vendor hands you a steaming cup without asking. Cinnamon, clove, maybe a hint of something herbal and mysterious. You sip, grateful. It coats your tongue and chases the fish ghosts from your throat. You find a low wall and sit. Around you, the market buzzes, vendors packing up, scavengers picking through scraps, children darting under carts in search of dropped fruit or a crust of bread. Joke 3. A boy waves a leek at you like a sword. You knight him Sir Onion of Les Halles. He bows solemnly, then eats it whole. You close your eyes briefly. The air here is a complicated stew, sweet, sour, savory, rotten, fresh, burned. Every breath tells a new story. Every scent is a sentence, and most of them end with, "You probably shouldn't touch that." The market begins to dim, not from light but from noise. Vendors shout less. The air cools, smells retreat a little, settling into the stones and the gutters. Tomorrow they'll rise again. You rise too, your stomach rumbling in confusion. Was that hunger or just survival instinct? As you leave Les Halles, the last thing you smell is the faint trace of someone frying onions in butter, deep in a stall you missed. It floats toward you like a dream you almost had, then vanishes. And just like that, the market exhales its last breath of the day. You carry the memory with you, like a coat you can't quite take off. You wander away from the fading chaos of Les Halles, boots damp, nose resigned, and your thoughts filled with roasted onions and eel revenge. The streets are quieter here, shadowed under crooked balconies and shuttered windows. But your journey through the smells of 18th century Paris isn't over. Not yet. Because now you're headed to the river. Yes, the Seine. You'd think a wide, flowing river cutting through the heart of the city would be a source of relief, a place to breathe, a place to cleanse the nasal palate after a hard day of cheese assaults and animal bits. You'd be wrong. The Seine of the 1700s is not your postcard river. It's a little like Paris's diary, full of secrets, decay, and things nobody really wants to admit are in there. It smells like a poem written by someone who gave up halfway through and spilled soup on the page. Mainstream historical fact: the Seine was used for everything: washing, watering, disposing, and sometimes even drinking, depending on your level of desperation or denial. It functioned as Paris's main artery, but also as its open sewer. You approach the riverbank cautiously, your feet finding uneven cobblestones slick with who knows what. The water laps lazily at the edges, neither blue nor brown, just river-colored. A translucent soup of refuse, fish, mud, blood, and the occasional unfortunate object. Or person. A barge floats by stacked with firewood and barrels. Behind it trails the scent of wet wood and ale. You imagine the crew is used to worse. One of them sneezes dramatically, then keeps rowing. The river has its own perfume, and it's a curious blend. Damp stone, rotting vegetation, old coins, wet leather, and just a hint of despair. Like a monastery basement after a flood. Joke 1, you swear something just blinked at you from beneath the surface. You blink back. It's only polite. You pause near a laundry station, little more than a wooden platform tethered to shore where washerwomen beat fabric into submission. The rhythmic slap of soaked cloth is hypnotic. The smell? Less so. Wet linen, sweat, and soap mingle in the breeze. And by soap, we mean early attempts, animal fat, ashes, and vague dreams of lavender. The women scrub like the fabric owes them money, muttering curses at invisible stains. A child picks through a pile of undergarments, searching for something dry enough to steal. You walk on, nose twitching. There's a butcher's runoff draining directly into the Seine not 20 feet ahead. It trickles over cobbles like a very tired murder. The smell is dark, iron-rich, meaty, final. You try not to breathe too deeply. The eels you suspect are thriving. Quirky tidbit: it was rumored that if you dropped a coin into the river with a wish, the smell alone would discourage the gods from granting it. Nearby, a fisher hauls in a line. The catch flaps half-heartedly, smelling of both river and resignation. He inspects it, shrugs, and pockets it. You silently send your condolences. You lean over the stone edge of the quay. The breeze shifts. The scent sharpens, laced with something sour, fermented grain, vinegar, old beer. Ah, yes, a brewery upwind. And just beyond it, a tannery. You grimace. Tanning leather is a violent olfactory event. Skin soaked in urine, then scraped, then re-soaked in lime and aged in dog feces. Yes, you heard that right. Dog feces. All in the noble name of supple gloves and sturdy boots. Joke 2. Somewhere, a fashion icon in powdered wig and spotless breeches is breathing in the aroma of artisanal dung leather without blinking. Courage. Historians still argue whether the river's condition directly influenced lower-class health, or if people simply evolved stronger noses, you think, slightly dizzy. The answer is probably both. You pass under a stone bridge. The underside smells like dripping moss and old wine. Someone has set up a small cooking fire, onion, garlic, and what might be salted cod. It's not terrible if you stand upwind and pretend not to see the rat darting off with a stolen crust. A group of children is skipping stones by the riverbank. One of them dares the others to touch the water. One does. There is regret. You keep walking. Joke 3. You consider bottling this eau de Seine and selling it as a revolutionary cologne. Call it Le Miserable. By now, the city is truly settling down. Lamps flicker along the quay, their orange light casting ripples across the water. The river looks prettier in the dark. Everything does when you can't smell it. You find a bench, miraculously unoccupied and only slightly damp. You sit, letting the humid, fish-laced air wash over you. There's something deeply Parisian about this, contemplating life by a polluted river, half drunk on mulled wine and weird cheese fumes. Across the way, a barge is unloading crates, a dog barks, someone laughs. The city hums on, always moving, always exhaling its complicated breath. The Seine is not just a smell, it's a memory, a metaphor, a soup of life and rot and time. And for the people of 18th century Paris, it was inescapable. You close your eyes for a moment. The air is cool now, the smells soften by night. The river continues to carry everything and everyone. Gossip, guts, soap bubbles, wishes, lies, poetry. You'd be shocked if it didn't carry the occasional chamber pot, too. But by now, nothing surprises your nose. You've survived worse. Remember the cheese wheel ambush? The stars glint overhead, their light reflected in little oil-slick swirls across the water's surface. It's almost beautiful. Almost. And then a fish leaps and splashes, and suddenly you're wet. You sigh. Yep, still Paris. You rise from the damp bench with a creak in your knees and a nose that's seen things it may never recover from. Your journey continues along the narrowing alleys that lead you away from the river and back into the woven web of old Paris. This part of the city doesn't smell like sewage or fish or bubbling tanneries. No, this part smells like something quieter and somehow worse. You're entering the land of old interiors, the bedrooms, salons, stairwells, and storage spaces that rarely see sunlight or soap. The places where people live, breathe, snore, sweat, and occasionally die. If the city is a body, this is its breath. You duck beneath a hanging laundry line, linen shirts ghosting in the breeze, and climb a stone stairway into the upper stories of a crooked tenement. The wood creaks underfoot. You knock on no doors. There's no need. The building breathes around you, and its breath is unmistakable. Mainstream historical fact. Most Parisian buildings in the 1700s were densely packed and poorly ventilated. Windows were small, ceilings low, chimneys unreliable. Personal hygiene was erratic at best. The average person bathed once a month, sometimes less, and deodorant was a concept left for future centuries. You pass by a slightly ajar door. From inside comes the musty scent of human life. Unwashed bodies, oily hair, musty bedsheets, extinguished candles, and too many people crammed into too little space. Someone coughs, someone else snores. The smell is like being buried alive in wool and breath. You move on. A cat brushes past your ankle and disappears into the rafters. It smells better than the hallway, by far. You reach a communal privy tucked into the corner of a landing. You don't dare open the door. The odor seeps through anyway, pungent, acrid, eye-watering. It's an outhouse that's been married to a stairwell and divorced from any responsibility. You descend, choosing instead to explore the ground floor quarters of an aging noblewoman who hasn't left her room in 20 years. Her maid lets you peek inside. The air is thick with perfume, but not the charming kind. It's a cloying blend of jasmine, ambergris, rosewater, and despair. There's a powdery layer of crushed petals and snuff dust covering every surface. The curtains haven't been washed since Louis XIV was in short pants. Quirky tidbit. Some Parisians believed that bad smells caused illness, so they fought odor with more odor. Pouches of herbs, scented handkerchiefs, and heavy cologne that could knock a man off a horse. You retreat, head swimming. Next stop, the baker's apartment above his shop. You'd think this would be better. And it is, at first. The faint scent of yeast and flour hovers in the air like hope. But then you open the pantry door. Breadcrumbs, mice, damp. Something that was once an onion and now is an experiment in organic philosophy. Historians still argue whether urban stench directly influenced the French Revolution, or if people were simply tired of everything, including the smell of their neighbors, you muse, breathing shallowly. You duck back outside for air, which, in this part of town, is a mixed blessing. The street-level apartments are a strange cocktail. One smells of boiled cabbage and wet boots. Another reeks of sweat and garlic rubbed into every surface like some kind of curse. A third you can't even identify. You call it mystery beef and inherited sorrow. Joke 1. Somewhere a trendy perfumier is bottling this essence as parfum de résistance. You pass a spice merchant's back room. Now here, finally, is something interesting. The scent of cinnamon, pepper, and dried citrus peel hangs in the air like a memory from a better-smelling world. It's so vivid your eyes almost water from relief. The merchant waves a dismissive hand. "The rats like it too much," he says, grimacing. "I've had to lock the nutmeg away." Further down the lane, a tavern opens its doors. A rush of warmth and wood smoke greets you, chased quickly by spilled beer, body odor, and pickled something. You step inside anyway, if only to dry your boots and document one more layer of olfactory punishment. Joke 2. You wonder if medieval taverns had nose-blind regulars, or if everyone just silently agreed not to acknowledge each other's scent. The bartender wipes the counter with a rag that might be older than the building. It smells like everything that's ever happened in this room, and none of it was good. You sit beside a man who's clearly been here all day. He smells of tobacco, sweat, goat cheese, and pride. You nod respectfully. He nods back. There is an understanding. A candle burns low in the wall niche, releasing a faint scent of beeswax and smoke. You focus on that. You let that tiny flame be your lighthouse in a storm of funk. Quirky tidbit: some upper-class homes had rooms specifically designed to hold good air, like closets filled with lavender bundles or citrus pomanders. The idea was that you could step in, reset your senses, and return to reality without screaming. Back on the street, the wind shifts again. Someone is roasting chestnuts, someone else is boiling fish. The smells duel mid-air like rival fencers. You pause outside a schoolhouse. It smells of chalk dust, wet wool, and ink. The kind of scent that gets trapped in old books. You like it. You wonder if smell can time travel. If maybe somewhere in the future, someone will bottle this and call it Eau d'Enlightenment. Joke 3. Only 40% guaranteed not to summon ghosts. As you round a final corner, heading back toward your temporary lodgings, you catch a strange mix: flowers, sweat, fried batter, and candle soot. You realize it's all of Paris compressed into one breath. It's not a pleasant smell, but it's familiar now. You've adapted. You've survived rivers and markets and boudoirs and alleyways. Your nose may never be the same, but it's stronger now. Maybe even wiser. And you're not done yet. There's more to sniff. You wake up in the middle of the night. If you ever truly slept, your nose already remembering where it is before your eyes open. It's that same compact, sweaty air pressed like wrinkled linen between stone walls. A small oil lamp flickers by the door, its flame hissing with each cough of wind through the shutter cracks. Your boots are still damp. The wool blanket still smells like last month's stew. You sit up slowly. The cot creaks. Something shifts in the rafters. You don't look. Instead, you breathe in and ready yourself for the next chapter of your increasingly intimate relationship with 18th century Paris. You're heading to one of the worst-smelling jobs in the city, the night soil collectors. Mainstream historical fact: Paris had no proper sewer system in the 1700s. Instead, human waste from chamber pots and cesspits was either tossed into the streets or gathered manually by vidangeurs, night workers who emptied privies and cesspools by hand and carted the waste outside the city limits. You make your way out, descending the rickety stairs with careful steps. Outside, the city is quieter now. The stink of horse dung and smoke has dulled under the cool night air. But not for long. You meet your guide near the Rue de la Boucherie. He's already elbow deep in his work, wearing a thick leather apron, gloves stiff with some previous horror, and a look that says, "Don't ask questions." You decide to follow silently. The tools of the trade are simple: wooden buckets, iron rakes, thick ropes, and an overwhelming sense of resignation. You reach the back of a boarding house. The courtyard is muddy and dark. A small wooden hatch creaks open at the base of the wall. Your guide lights a lantern and peers into the cesspit. The smell hits instantly. It's not just bad, it's metaphysical. You question reality itself. Joke 1. Your soul attempts to leave your body, but is blocked by the sheer density of the air. He begins the extraction process. It's slow, it's wet, it's louder than you'd expect. The bucket splashes down, fills, and is hauled back up with a slosh that will haunt your dreams. You help secure the load onto the cart. The buckets are lined in wax cloth, but the smell still escapes, thick and meaty with a sharp acidic tang. You catch yourself gagging and apologize. Your guide just shrugs. You get used to it, he says, but you're not sure he really has. Quirky tidbit. Some night soil men were so efficient they developed regular clientele and ran competitive routes. The best ones were known for being discreet, quick, and only mildly fragrant. You continue through the streets. Other workers appear, like a shadow army with carts and buckets. They whistle, they joke, they smell like the end of civilization. You pass a bridge where a couple is arguing loudly. The man gestures wildly, the woman holds a bucket. You don't stick around to see what she does with it. Eventually, the carts are driven to the outer fringes of the city. The smell gets worse. Not stronger, necessarily, just more complex. Layers, nuance, notes of fermentation, tannin, rot, despair, and oddly, pears. Historians still argue whether the night soil trade influenced the design of modern sanitation systems or if it merely delayed progress by making the filth more manageable. You arrive at a dumping site, essentially a designated mound outside the walls. It's steamy, it's slushy, it's surrounded by a low fence that keeps nothing out except your hope. Your guide heaves one final bucket and wipes his forehead. "We do this every night," he says, "except Sundays. Even waste needs a Sabbath." You thank him for his time and pretend your clothes don't now carry the smell of ancient sins. You walk back toward the inner city, choosing a different route this time, wider boulevards, hoping for breeze. You pass a butcher shop being cleaned. The scent of blood mixes with soap, and somehow that's comforting now. Familiar, manageable. Joke 2. You seriously consider bottling it and calling it Eau de Recovery. You stop at a bakery's early morning window. The baker is just lighting the oven. Flour drifts in lazy clouds. There's a faint crackle of kindling. The smell of rising dough is the first kindness your nose has received in hours. You linger there, eyes half closed, warmth on your face. You imagine curling up inside the oven like some kind of grateful cinnamon bun. The baker offers you a piece of crust. It's still hot, and it tastes like a small victory. You nod in thanks. He nods back without speaking. There's a solidarity among those who rise before the sun and before the smell. Quirky tidbit, some bakers added rose water to their early morning loaves, not for flavor, but to disguise the odor of smoke from low-grade coal. As you keep walking, the sun begins to rise. Light creeps down the buildings like honey. The shadows retreat, but the smell remains. You're not sure it'll ever fully leave. You pass a row of washing lines already hung with clean shirts. Someone scrubbed them with lye and something vaguely lemony. The scent makes you believe, just for a moment, that Paris might be survivable after all. Joke 3, or at least that your sense of smell hasn't been replaced by a sixth sense for mold. You finally reach your lodging. You strip off your outer layers and hang them far, far from your cot. You wash your hands with ash soap and splash some rose water on your face. It's like trying to smother a fire with confetti. You lie back on the cot, close your eyes, and then you smile. Because despite everything, despite buckets and broth and breathing other people's air, you have made it through a full Parisian night. You, the humble smell tourist, the unsuspecting nostril adventurer, the nose-turned historian. The day is just beginning, but for now, you drift. There will be more to smell, more to forget, and more to wonder at in this world where perfume and privies danced a strange and stinky waltz through time. You wake again, if it can be called that, because sleep in 18th century Paris isn't so much rest as it is a form of strategic unconsciousness. Still, your eyes open to another dim morning. The room is cold. The chamber pot, not yours thankfully, was used last night by someone who clearly needed less cabbage in their diet. But today you're headed somewhere cleaner, supposedly. You're going to visit a perfumer. Yes, amid the stew of refuse and rot, someone had to make Paris smell better, or at least try. And perfumers were the unsung dreamers of the city, wielding lavender, civet, and desperation in equal measure. Mainstream historical fact: in 18th century Paris, perfume wasn't just for elegance, it was a necessity. With hygiene standards precarious at best, perfumes were considered both cosmetic and medicinal, used to mask bodily odor, ward off disease, and occasionally impress a noble or two. You shuffle along narrow cobbled streets, passing laundresses wringing linen in gray water and a meat vendor casually swatting flies with a pig's ear. Every few steps is a new olfactory ambush. Tar, cheese, soap, fish. You dodge a suspicious puddle and nearly step into a far less ambiguous one. Then you reach the Rue Saint-Honoré. It's narrower here, but strangely elegant. A few carriages pass, there's a florist with yellow marigolds drooping sadly in the dust, and finally, the perfumer's shop. Its wooden sign painted with a hand holding a rose, though the petals are faded to a faint pink smear. You step inside, it's dim and rich. Glass bottles line the walls like a chemical rainbow. There are jars of crushed herbs, resin, dried petals, and things you don't recognize, labeled in Latin or worse, French cursive. The scent here is heavy but not unpleasant. Layered, floral, musky, faintly animal. The perfumer emerges from a curtain. He's wearing a linen smock and an expression that says, "I know something you don't." He welcomes you with a curt nod and gestures to a wooden stool. He begins explaining how perfume is made, not with the efficiency of a salesman, but the passion of someone who has truly sniffed the abyss and chosen to fight back. You learn about enfleurage, using animal fat to absorb scents from flowers. You learn about distillation, tinctures, maceration, and the all-important balance between base, middle, and top notes. Quirky tidbit: one popular perfume note was ambergris. Yes, that ambergris, the waxy substance from a sperm whale's intestines. It aged like fine cheese and smelled oddly nice. Some claimed it was a divine accident. You lean in to sniff a vial of orange blossom. It's sweet, like summer trying to write a love letter. Another smells like cloves and candle smoke. One smells like a thunderstorm on velvet. The perfumer lets you sample his prized blend, rose, civet, and sandalwood. It's intense, powdery, and primal. You feel like you've been punched gently by a duchess. Historians still argue whether these scents were expressions of class, tools of seduction, or subtle weapons in the olfactory warfare of social life. You imagine nobles doused in this, stepping through ballrooms where sweat and perfume wrestle in the air above powdered wigs and lace. The perfumer offers you a tiny bottle to take, a token of your visit. You thank him. He doesn't smile, but there's something in his eyes, a kind of professional pity, as if he knows the rest of your day will smell considerably worse. You step outside and dab a drop on your wrist. It briefly overpowers the fishmonger's cart nearby. Briefly. You continue wandering. Down a quieter street, you spot a man selling bundles of dried lavender. A woman nearby is burning juniper twigs. You're beginning to notice how people cope. Not fix, not clean, just cope. You stop by a church where the scent of wax and incense spills out with the toll of a bell. A funeral is passing through the doors. The priest wears robes heavy with years of ceremonial smoke. You wonder if death smells like anything, or if, in Paris, everything eventually smells like everything else. Joke 1. Maybe even the Grim Reaper wears cologne here. Probably something mossy with a citrus top note. You sit on a stone bench near the Seine. The breeze carries water scent, muddy, old, not quite fresh, but still better than most of the alleys. A fish leaps. A child throws bread. Somewhere, someone is scrubbing a step with vinegar. You pull out your perfume bottle and sniff again. It's still there. You're thankful. It anchors you. Quirky tidbit. Some believed strong perfumes protected the body from miasmas, those bad airs that supposedly cause disease. So people would walk around with pomanders, scented gloves, or even orange stuffed handkerchiefs pressed to their face during strolls. You stroll along the river, imagining you're one of those nobles. You try holding your head high. You adjust your posture. You try to look like you belong, but your boots are still muddy from the night soil excursion, and your face still carries traces of horror. So you drop the act and sit again. You watch a barge pull past. The scent of pitch and sweat floats by. You wonder what the perfume of a real Paris day would be called. Maybe Gutter Number 5 or Ode to Resilience. Joke 2. You briefly consider launching your own line, notes of bread crust, goat hair, ash soap, and existential doubt. You close your eyes. The sun warms your face. Someone nearby is peeling an apple. You hear the thud of hooves and the creak of a cart. You smell the soft whiff of burning oak. It's all bearable somehow. Maybe you've acclimated. Maybe the perfume is stronger than you thought. Or maybe, like everyone else, you're learning to survive by picking and choosing which smells get to mean something. You head back just as bells mark midday. The streets are busier now. More voices, more steps, more smells. And yet, in the crowd, you feel oddly calm. Perfume, you realize, is less about hiding something than it is about declaring a preference. In a world filled with rot, someone had the courage to say, "I'd rather smell like lilac." That's Paris for you. Your feet ache, but not in the way they did when you first arrived in this city of fog and ferment. Now they ache like old friends reminding you they exist. As you pass a group of musicians, 2 fiddles, 1 drum, you pause, not because the tune is particularly good, it's not, but because the street smells momentarily like pipe tobacco and roasting chestnuts. A brief reprieve. You're headed toward the marketplace now. And not just any market, the legendary Les Halles, the belly of Paris, as it's called. You take a slow, steady breath and prepare your nose for war. Mainstream historical fact, Les Halles was Paris's central marketplace, operating in various forms since the 12th century. By the 1700s, it sprawled across several blocks, open-air chaos, enclosed stalls, and 100 mingled aromas, raw meat, fresh vegetables, drying herbs, blood, and bread. You arrive early enough to witness both the cleanup from overnight deliveries and the setup for daytime buyers. Wooden carts squeak as they roll crates of onions past towering pyramids of cabbages. Fish glisten on stone slabs, packed in the thinnest promise of shaved ice. Someone dumps a bucket of water onto the cobbles. You flinch. Flinch. The water is pinkish. You decide not to wonder. The sounds are layered too. Barkers yelling out prices, horses clopping past, a child crying because he dropped a turnip, the clatter of knives being honed, a butcher's laugh too loud and too wet. You sidestep a hanging duck and duck under a hanging pig, and then the smell hits. It's like entering a cathedral of protein. Everything that has ever lived and died might be here, and someone is definitely trying to sell it by the pound. A man in a leather apron waves a chicken at you as if trying to bless your sins away. You politely decline. The chicken does not take it personally. Quirky tidbit: certain stalls specialized in high game, meats that were intentionally kept long enough to develop what we might now call a funk. Yes, they liked it, or at least claimed to. Your nose disagrees forcefully. You stop by the bread section. Finally, something comforting. The scent of rising yeast, toasted crust, and warm grain is like a lullaby to your overworked senses. You buy a small loaf, warm and rough, and tear off a piece. It's chewy and a little sour. You don't care, you're halfway to crying. Historians still argue whether Les Halles was a miracle of supply chain ingenuity or a chaotic health hazard that somehow didn't cause total societal collapse. You watch as an eel escapes its barrel. A boy chases it, slips, and lands in a puddle of brine and beetroot juice. No one reacts. This appears normal. Further down, a spice vendor fans the air to keep flies from landing on his display. He catches your eye and offers a pinch of cinnamon. You inhale. Your nose does a grateful pirouette. It's strange how quickly your body can shift from gagging at tripe to yearning for nutmeg. Joke 1. You briefly imagine trying to pitch Les Halles as a tourist attraction today. Come for the historic blood gutters, stay for the cow lungs. You pass by the cheese section. You'd hope this would be gentle. It is not. The cheese here is ancient, proud, aggressively assertive. One particularly confident wedge of Roquefort smells like someone whispered secrets into a cave full of mushrooms. You nod in respect, but you move on. You see a woman slicing apples, dipping the wedges in lemon juice to keep them from browning. A kind detail. She hums while she works, and her stall smells sharply clean in comparison to everything around it. You buy a slice. It's tart with a faint floral note. You let the taste sit on your tongue as you walk. One small moment of clarity in a stew of chaos. You pass the flower vendors. They fight an uphill battle against geography. Bouquets of violets, sprigs of rosemary, and bundles of marigolds try their best to punch through the odors nearby. And for a moment it works. You inhale a deep breath of crushed petals and forget where you are. Then you trip on a cabbage. You stumble, recover, and pretend you meant to examine the cabbage. The vendor raises one eyebrow and goes back to sleep. You finally find yourself in a quieter corner of the market. Here, older women are selling potions, salves, and strange-smelling teas. One claims her herbs can make you immune to city breath. Another offers a jar of something gray and sludgy labeled simply for strength. You do not ask. A man nearby lights a pipe. The smoke curls up like a question mark. You follow its drift and find yourself in a calm lull. The sounds fade, the smell softens. You sit beside a wooden crate and just breathe. The market is alive, a breathing organism with too many stomachs and not enough noses. But somehow it works. People buy, sell, haggle, laugh, shout, and push their way through this olfactory marathon like it's perfectly normal. Joke 2. Somewhere a Parisian child is probably writing an essay titled, "Why My City Smells Like 12 People Arguing in a Soup Pot." You watch a boy pass carrying a bundle of leeks as tall as he is. He smiles at you. You smile back. Maybe it's the cheese fumes talking, but you feel oddly peaceful. Your loaf of bread is nearly gone. Your fingers are sticky from pear juice. Your boots smell like 6 different animals. But here on this sun-drenched curb, you feel okay. Quirky tidbit. Vendors in Les Halles were known to sing little jingles to advertise their wares. Some of these songs became so popular that they inspired folk verses, and a few even survived into the 19th century. You hum one of the tunes you overheard. It's catchy, annoyingly so. You might be humming it in your sleep later, whether you want to or not. Eventually, the bells toll again. It's late afternoon. Time to shuffle on. You pass through a stone archway and back onto a larger road. The sounds of the market fade behind you. The smell, however, lingers, woven into your clothes, your hair, your very understanding of how air can betray you. And yet, you don't hate it. That's the thing about Paris. It overwhelms, assaults, and charms in equal measure. Even at its worst, there's a story in every whiff. You sigh, and the scent that rises is mostly just bread. Your journey through the sensory gauntlet of 18th century Paris continues, and your feet carry you toward a less glamorous, but perhaps even more revealing part of city life. The side streets, alleyways, and latrine corners no travel guide would ever mention. Congratulations, you're entering the real olfactory underground. These narrow, cramped lanes between buildings are where Paris breathes out the stuff it doesn't want polite society to see. Wastewater, refuse, and secrets. Here the smells don't announce themselves, they sneak up on you. Mainstream historical fact, although Paris had rudimentary drainage and sewer systems in the 18th century, much of the waste disposal still depended on gutters, cesspits, and open-air dumping. The city's famed routes and impasses doubled as unofficial flow zones for whatever couldn't be carried away in time. As you squeeze between 2 leaning buildings, walls so close your elbows brush them, you notice how suddenly the scent changes. It's not dramatic. It's like a suggestion of something foul whispered straight into your ear. You step carefully. The cobblestones are uneven and slick. Is that dampness from rain or from something less poetic? Quirky tidbit. There were professional rakers whose job was to clean out cesspits, collect human waste, and cart it out of the city, often at night, to avoid offending the senses of the daytime population. They were nicknamed vidangeurs, and let's just say their perfume budget was minimal. A rat scurries by. Not a cute cartoon rat with a chef's hat. This one is muscular, clearly a veteran of many trash wars. You nod respectfully. It ignores you. Probably has appointments. You turn a corner and hit a wall of scent so solid your brain tries to reboot. It's a mixture of wet wool, boiled cabbage, and something distinctly ammonia-like. There's also a hint of horse. Not the pleasant barn kind. The kind of horse that's very tired of pulling aristocrats and is letting its feelings be known via puddles. A washerwoman nearby scrubs a shirt in a basin. You watch, hypnotized, as she beats it against a stone. The water is already brown. You consider offering your condolences to the shirt. Historians still argue whether the smell of these side alleys represented neglect, economic necessity, or just the stubborn nature of city survival. You pass a pile of hay that might have been golden once. Now it's gray and steaming. You don't ask questions. Further down, you hear humming. A man is urinating directly into the gutter while singing what might be a sea shanty. He waves. You pretend not to see. A small shop juts out from the wall. Just a hole in the facade, really. Inside, a woman sells roasted chestnuts and something that smells like boiled shoe leather. She calls it soup. You pass. She shrugs. Joke 1, somewhere in this alley there's probably a cheese aging in a shoe for character. As you move on, the passage narrows again. You're no longer walking, you're shuffling. A cat dashes past your feet, chasing a pigeon. The pigeon takes off and drops something unmentionable. You sidestep. Barely. The walls here are lined with wooden boards, an attempt to cover the stonework maybe, or perhaps just to soak up sound and smell. They don't do a great job of either. Someone opens a shutter above you and dumps a basin's worth of water into the street. You yelp and jump back. It hits the ground with a slap. The smell is indescribable. Joke 2. You're starting to understand why powdered wigs were so popular. They probably doubled as makeshift gas masks. In a side doorway, you see a child sitting with a small wooden box. Inside are several rats, each wearing a ribbon. You think this might be a game or a business. You nod, he nods. The rats do not nod. You keep walking. Your eyes water. It could be from emotion. More likely it's from whatever just sloshed past your boot. You try not to think about it. Quirky tidbit. In some neighborhoods, residents paid a modest fee for night soil collectors to haul away the contents of chamber pots, but many simply dumped it out the window with a shout of, "Garde à l'eau! Watch out for the water!" The historical equivalent of yelling, "Incoming!" You look up. The windows above are closed. For now. A soft breeze carries a new scent, stale beer and burned sugar. You follow it like a cartoon character floating midair. It leads you to a small tavern door, half open, leaking light and noise. You peer in. Inside, people are drinking, talking, and sweating in close proximity. The smell of unwashed clothes blends with cheap wine and overcooked onions. You don't enter, but you appreciate the commitment to fermentation. You walk again, this time toward the river. Even from a block away, the Seine makes its olfactory presence known. Not like a perfume, more like an accusation. Mainstream historical fact. The Seine in the 18th century served many purposes. Transport, washing, drinking, dumping. Yes, all those things in the same water. And no, filtration wasn't really a thing yet. You approach the quay and look down at the slow, murky water. It smells of mud, dead fish, and civic compromise. You see someone washing socks, next to someone dumping ash, next to someone filling a jug with drinking water. You have questions. None of them will be answered. A group of boys laugh as they run along the edge, tossing pebbles into the river. One of them slips and falls in. The others wait. He climbs out, shivering and dripping, plop, and they all cheer. It seems this is a regular event. Joke 3. You wonder if the phrase, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," was invented right here on this very riverbank, probably by someone with 3 stomach parasites. You take a final breath, shallow and strategic. Even in its filthiest corners, Paris is alive. It smells terrible, it's unforgettable, and somehow it endures. You turn back toward the heart of the city. The alleys will always be here, perfumed by history's leftovers. The day is getting darker. You've smelled more than anyone reasonably should in a single lifetime. But one final corner remains, where perfume meets politics and scent becomes a statement. You brace yourself. One last deep dive awaits. The final corner you round brings you into the perfumed paradox of the Paris elite, where scent stops being a symptom and becomes a solution, an identity, a weapon. Welcome to the powdered, perfumed, and powdered again upper crust of 18th century Paris, where the stink is just as intense, only hidden under several layers of jasmine, ambergris, and lies. You stand now before a tall, gilded townhouse. Not Versailles. Not quite, but close enough for the nose. The door swings open with a hush of silk and a puff of floral musk. You're stepping into a world that floats several inches above the ground, thanks largely to heeled shoes and ego. Mainstream historical fact. In elite Parisian society, perfumes were survival tools. With little bathing and no modern deodorant, strong scents were slathered, dabbed, and powdered onto every available surface. Wigs, handkerchiefs, clothing, and even furniture. The air here is thick with lavender, bergamot, and a sweetness that's trying a bit too hard. You breathe in and immediately feel like you're being embraced by a bouquet that forgot its boundaries. The marble floor gleams, but you don't trust it. Everything in this room smells aggressively clean, but you know better now. A lady drifts by. Yes, drifts, in a gown so wide it could seat four. Her cheeks are a masterpiece of rouge, and her perfume trail hits you like a floral uppercut. She fans herself with a lace creation and looks at you like you're something the cat brought in, then politely covered with roses. Quirky tidbit. Ambergris, a prized perfume ingredient, comes from the digestive system of sperm whales. It was considered aphrodisiacal and absurdly luxurious. Yes, you're now surrounded by people who think whale vomit makes them smell irresistible. A gentleman joins her, a count probably. He smells of tobacco, vanilla, and very old leather. His wig is enormous. You wonder if it has its own cleaning staff. Historians still argue whether this obsession with perfume was genuine hygiene or just a way to overpower reality. Joke 1. You briefly imagine a duel being fought over who has the better smelling gloves. You don't laugh out loud. This place takes itself very seriously. A servant slips past carrying a tray of scented cloths. They're not for cleaning. They're for guests to dab at their temples and wrists to refresh between sips of wine and sneers at the poor. You walk through the drawing room where chairs are stuffed with noblemen and women giggling behind fans, surrounded by clouds of orange blossom and narcissism. The perfume is so dense it's practically a fog. Your nose twitches. Someone notices. You pretend it's a sneeze. They pretend you don't exist. You catch a glimpse of the powder room. Not for makeup, but for wigs. There, a gentleman has his head shoved into a cloud of white powder laced with rose oil and orris root. He sneezes explosively. A valet pats his shoulder like he survived something noble. Outside the window, a perfume peddler passes by in the street. Ironically, the best scents of the day are coming from his tray, not the aristocrat's sachets. He's hawking rose water, violet oil, and a citrusy cologne made famous by traveling Italians. You envy his honesty. You step into the ballroom. The scent here is staggering. It's a symphony of florals, musks, citruses, and desperation. The dancers twirl in a swirl of lace and scent, not one of them aware or willing to admit that their feet are probably fermenting in their shoes. Mainstream historical fact. While public bathhouses had mostly fallen out of fashion among the elite, some aristocrats bathed just once or twice a year, preferring to dry wash with cloths soaked in perfume or vinegar. To be clean was to be dry and fragrant, not wet and common. Joke 2. At this point, you start wondering if a cloud of perfume could qualify for citizenship. You walk along the edge of the ballroom and see a maid discreetly blotting a noblewoman's underarms with a perfumed linen. They both pretend this isn't happening. Everywhere you look, scent is power. To wear the most fashionable blend is to signal wealth, taste, and immunity from the grimier parts of Paris. But you know the truth now. You've seen the alleyways, the pig markets, the Seine. You know what's under this sugar-coated symphony. Quirky tidbit. Some courtiers carried hollow walking sticks filled with aromatic herbs so they could sniff discreetly when encountering unpleasant odors, which was always. It's the original pocket air freshener. As the orchestra swells, the dancers begin another set. You spot a man's wig starting to slip, revealing his scalp underneath, pink and unwashed. A servant swoops in to powder it mid-waltz. The man never stops moving. You applaud internally. You find yourself near a table of perfumes, tiny vials of unimaginable expense. One is said to contain the scent of freshly plucked jasmine from India. Another claims to be made from the tears of Bulgarian roses. A third, just labeled Musk Supreme. You do not sniff that one. Joke 3. If money had a smell, this room would still outdo it. The party continues, oblivious to the city outside. Here they have successfully smothered the world in violets and privilege. You turn to leave. The perfume clings to your clothes, your hair, your teeth. You smell expensive, and it's exhausting. You step out into the night air. The Seine greets you again, honest, earthy, and a little angry. The sky above is violet. The stars are blurry, maybe from the lingering rosewater in your eyes. Paris smells like rot and roses, sweat and sugar, fish and fancy. You've breathed it all in. Somehow you're still standing. The city exhales. You do too. Now it's time to sleep. Wind down. The streets of Paris fade behind you now, the heavy smells giving way to stillness. Let your breath slow just a little as you leave behind the sweaty ballrooms, the sharp cheese carts, the layers of musk and grime and jasmine. Your feet, once dodging refuse and stepping around uncertainty, now rest. The cobblestones have disappeared. There is only softness beneath you now, your bed, your pillow, the gentle pull of sleep starting to settle over your thoughts. Let the sensory chaos of the 18th century dissolve. The sounds, the textures, the scents, all drift like old fog rolling off the river, sliding gently into memory. No more fish markets, no more powder, just the soft hush of nothing happening. You are safe now. Far from the alleyways, far from the powdered wigs, far from the echoes of clinking glasses and snorting pigs. The city has quieted, so can you. Close your eyes a little heavier now. Maybe tomorrow you'll visit another time, another city, another odd little pocket of history where even the smells have a story to tell. But for now, nothing more needs to happen. No steps to take, no more facts to hold in your head. Just you, floating weightless and empty of urgency. Sleep is waiting, and unlike 18th century Paris, it smells like clean sheets and quiet dreams. So let go, sink deeper, and let the story slip away. End of script. Sweet dreams.